Today I want to talk about this particular topic. Will Trump tariff increase inflation? Now, this is a debate that has been going on, and we are seeing more and more news portals actually talking about it. They are worried, and there's a lot of debate going on about this. So actually, come Monday, which is today, in roughly in a couple hours' time, Trump would be the next US president, right? So he recently reiterated his plan, saying, I'm going to put big taxes on imports from other countries. These taxes are what economists call tariffs. Immediately, there's a debate. Will these tariffs raise prices on the things we buy, i.e. inflation or not, right? Some people, like many economists or newspaper editors, says tariffs push up prices, so they are likely to cause inflation. Others, like hedge fund manager and Treasury Secretary nominee Scott Bessent, say no, because if one price goes up, people have less money for other stuff, so overall price won't rise. Now, the million-dollar question is that which side is correct? And today's sharing is actually to give views of both sides and a conclusion as well, right? So first, let's look at the incoming Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, right? His argument, what is he saying? Okay, so it boils down to this idea. Tariffs make one thing more expensive. So Bessent acknowledged that if tariffs go up on, say, imported cars or clothing, those items might get pricier. Okay, so what happens next is that people then have less money for everything else because they choose to, let's say, buy a car, or they used to want to buy this clothing, so they spend more money there, right? So they have less left in their wallets for other things like groceries, entertainment, and so on. So Besson believed that decreased demand for these other things would keep those prices from rising. So one basically cuts off the other, right? So the result of this is there's no net increase in overall prices. One takes off the other. Besson concludes that overall inflation wouldn't take off because rising prices in tariff goods would be balanced by lower demand and therefore lower or stable prices for non-tariff goods and services as well, right? So essentially, Besson is treating tariffs like a zero-sum game. Higher import prices equals to less disposable income to drive prices up in the rest of the economy, hence no sustained inflation across the board, right? So that is what Besson is arguing about, his idea. He's looking at this because you have to understand he is the incoming Treasury Secretary. So it's part of his job to ensure that his plans and Donald Trump's plans, is executed well, right? So of course you have the naysayers. They don't agree with Besant, and here are the arguments. First of all, we have seen this movie before during COVID-19. During COVID, shipping problems and factory shutdowns made certain items like cars, washing machines, and clothing suddenly more expensive. Those are what we call flexible price goods, right? Over time, the sticky price services. Now, when we say sticky, it means that price don't fluctuate that easily. It stays longer at that particular level. This is the total opposite of flexible price goods. So sticky prices are like rent, restaurant meals, or train fares, for example, transportation. Also had to raise their prices to cover their new costs over time. Okay, the key word here is over time, it's not immediate. Ultimately, the spike in prices caused inflation that lasted much longer than anyone wanted. That's because flexible prices went up quickly and then came down slowly, while sticky prices mostly rose and didn't come down. I believe that you have also experienced this where you are staying also, right? In your country. So a big tariff works the same way. It makes imported goods more expensive, just like supply chain disruptions did, which eventually pushes up the prices of services that depend on those goods, right? So this is what actually happened. So if we slap huge tariffs on everything we import, we'll likely see a similar pattern to COVID-19 supply shocks. The first thing that's going to happen is goods with flexible prices jump in cost almost immediately. Okay? Sticky price services take more time to raise the prices, but eventually they do, right? And number three, overall inflation could drag on for years. We have seen that. Okay, inflation only started coming down last year, slowly. Okay, and it took really, really long. So yes, the Fed and the government could decide to fight that inflation by severely reducing spending and raising interest rates, but that would cause a recession. Okay, so this is something that the Fed doesn't want to happen. They don't want a recession if possible, because during a recession, people would lose jobs, businesses might close, and the economy would definitely suffer, right? Now, these two are the arguments for those that believe that whatever Trump is planning, the tariffs won't affect inflation. And you have the opposite end saying that yes, it will affect. Look at COVID, it's the same thing. Now, one thing you need to understand also, things changes. Okay, there's one particular thing that the Republicans like to do. Okay, that is tax cuts. So we have to add tax cuts to the mix. Then we will have a clearer idea. Okay, because if Trump cuts taxes, consumers now have more disposable income, right? They can actually pay extra money. They have this extra spending cushion. That extra income could let them keep spending on non-imported goods and still afford the pricier imported goods as well, right? The goods that were tariffs, that hit by tariffs. So stronger demand for everything because they have that cushion. They may now have to cut back elsewhere. So the usual one price goes up, another down, offset is weaker, right? So in mainstream economics, the result is higher overall demand and a stronger chance of inflation, especially if businesses can't quickly produce more to meet the extra demand. So this is also another thing that we need to look at. So if you say, people are not going to spend because they've spent their money on something that's expensive, they won't spend on the rest, then if you add tax cut, yes, they can spend more. And this kind of spending will in a way induce inflation. So the question here right now is why Besson still thinks and insists that won't be inflation, okay? So Besson argues that if the Federal Reserve doesn't significantly increase the money supply, now we all know when they increase the money supply, it goes out to all this business, these banks, to stimulate spending, right? So in his view, tariffs may cause some initial price spikes, but overall inflation would be tempered if consumer spending simply shifts from one area to another, plus any extra demand might be absorbed through economic growth rather than pushing price upwards. So he also suggests that for inflation to become a long-term problem, wages and prices would need to keep chasing each other higher over time. As long as wage growth stays moderate, price won't spiral out of control. So if they're able to control that, it's fine. Okay, and we have seen stable wages for some time already, right? So this is what Besson thinks. Now, as a conclusion, of course, many economists disagree. They argue that if the government continues to cut taxes while running large deficits, the Federal Reserve may eventually resort to printing more money or keeping interest rates artificially low, both which can lead to high inflation over time. And then also one more thing, if they start printing, then they you know, this is not going to be easy at all for the US, because don't forget that the US high interest rates, they can't last long. They won't have enough money to spend, right? And if they spend only at the wrong place, like i.e. just paying back all the interest because the interest rate is high, they are not going to have enough money to spend at the right place to make America great again, to help the Americans, which is the cornerstone of the Donald Trump's election promise, right? So as a response to deal with this, right, if they want to cut taxes and how to control the spending, that's the reason why the response from Trump is by creating the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. This is established to streamline regulations, reduce spending, and pare down the federal workforce, right? So when you do this kind of initiatives is carried out as intended, especially reduce spending, cut interest, the cutting the interest rates, you reduce the spending there, and then you control, make sure everything is nice, then overall, Trump and his team can probably be successful in meeting their economic goals. And they won't see inflation actually coming up, right? So these are the things. It can be done. It's not to say it cannot be done, but everything must be executed to the dot. Okay, this department must work well, okay, to control spending at the right place. And if they're able to carry that, I believe that even the next president could actually come from the Republicans, because they would want to continue something that is really good. So it's just like, you cut tax, it's going to help the company, all the companies to make better money. The US stock market will rise. Okay, if you control the spending, then and not spend at the wrong places, like for example, giving money for war. I think the US citizens, they do not like that anymore, because that's really a lot of taxpayers' money moving out. So if you cut that part, you're going to save a lot already. And there are many things. There are really many things. Okay, that's the reason why you see right now they talks about the the war in Gaza is winding down already. Truce is there, and then probably next you would see Ukraine and Russia, calling for peace as well, and then yeah, many things can happen. So let's just wait. In a couple of hours, Donald Trump will be the next US president. And from there, we would have a better idea after his the first 100 days, and we, definitely we are able to plan all this out. So let's see. So with that, that's the report, fundamental report for today.